I wanted to take an opportunity to really thank the education team. And I'll come back to that in a bit about what they've done, but their support and their drive to really help take this powerful 3D technology and help really make it the new educational standard across the globe. What I thought today I'd do is take you through and just share a little bit about my background, my view on the education space, what we've been doing from the very beginning with Onshape, and then, of course, how I believe it helps with the commercial part of our business, but also how it's a virtuous cycle and how that commercial sector ultimately helps the education sector. And then, of course, hopefully lead you into the journey that you're going to have today through the symposium. Before I get too far into it, let me give you a little bit about my background, because I think it's actually very relevant to the education space in terms of some of the thinking. And many of you know John Herstick as well. He and I share a background and a passion from CAD for many decades. It's been a long journey. When I heard Jordan earlier talk about, when he sees a student change the color of a solid model and their eyes light up, I remember when, as a vendor, we used to charge for an option if you wanted a color model. So I've been in this space for a while. Anyway, my background: I have a BS in mechanical engineering and an MS in manufacturing systems, and then went on to sort of the business side of engineering and product design. But on a professional level, I had some experiences, I think, that shaped how I learned about industry and also how that might impact our products. And I say products because I've been involved in several throughout some, platform transformations, if you will. First, I started at a defense equipment manufacturer called Raytheon. It's a Massachusetts-based defense sector equipment company that also now has merged with several other larger United Technologies companies. But my early job was working on design of pre-production defense equipment, and we did both sort of pilot production for new products that we developed, but we also offloaded some of the production lines. So I get exposed to how things are made, working with the people in the sheet metal shop, working with machinists, working with how printed circuit boards are made, how you actually design and lay out cables and actually use nail boards and string cables. So it was a very powerful kind of experience to understanding both sort of technology, but also the practical side of how do you build things. In that journey, I had learned how to use computer vision's product, CAD's 4X, and then I ended up joining computer vision and worked in marketing, and they were very early CAD pioneer. And it was there that actually I met some of the people that I've gone on and done some work with in this industry. A little insider's view, at one of the sales meetings late at night here in Boston, after having a beer for a while and things were shutting down, somebody said, "Hey, who wants to go to Buzzy's roast beef?" And it was about midnight, or maybe it's 2 a.m. Anyway, it was John Herstick and myself, and we ended up taking a cab and just sat outside at a picnic table. And he sort of said, "What would you do if you were in charge?" And then I kind of turned that question back on him and said, "What would you do if you were in charge?" And this was at computer vision at a time that the company was going through many changes. And, it turns out that actually, before we knew it, the sun was coming up, and we'd spent 4 or 5 hours talking about business, about technology, and about CAD. And we realized we had kind of a very strong mutual interest in kind of this space. And so from there, I ended up joining SolidWorks before we had actually started shipping products. And I had a variety of roles there, ultimately being the CEO for about 6.5 years as we were in pretty big scaling mode. I fortunately met a wonderful woman, and her son came into my life and ended up getting married. My father was ill. So I left and took some time off. And then I was really fascinated by this platform shift, and this will come into the theme about CAD, about the cloud. And it was in the very, very early days, and people were talking about the cloud. And so I started going to a bunch of meetings in the Boston area and technology meetings and meeting with entrepreneurs. And I remember going to one of the first meetups in Boston and with AWS, Amazon Web Services. In fact, Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, was there, and there was 30 of us in rooms. So this is in the very early days. And I remember saying, this is going to change how we do compute, and it's going to change the world. And of course, the cloud's transformed everything in terms of our daily interactive lives. So in that vein, I ended up working with some early founders, on a company called CloudSwitch, which really was about taking on-premise applications and taking advantage of the cloud. And so you're starting to see a theme develop here between platform shifts and about new technology. And ultimately, we built the company. Verizon ended up acquiring the company to use it as some of their core technology. And I spent some time talking again with John Hirstick. He's a personal friend, and we were talking about kind of our SolidWorks days, and then also about how some of the new technology, you know, the mobile phone and cloud, and how they would transform what people could do, because we ultimately were sort of stuck in this world where the care and feeding of the systems of many of these file-based systems that you install software were just becoming so prohibitive in terms of how people could interact and communicate and collaborate and build products. And the kind of heat loss due to friction of managing these systems just became an overwhelming sort of burden for many of the users. And so we came up with the view of you know, look, the idea of sharing files, ultimately, when you have a copy of a file, that's like the root cause problem of many of the issues that people were dealing with. And we had looked at Google Docs and said, my gosh, this idea of having the application and the data in the cloud would allow for people to work in a very different way and to share information and to take advantage of all of this new technology. And so we ended up creating Onshape about 10 years ago. And then, of course, on a professional level, I'm involved in a couple other companies. One of them that I'm very interested in and active in the sense of loving the technology is Stratasys, which is a leading 3D printing company. And the other one is I'm interested just purely from a technology, but also kind of helping in many neurological issues, is working with some entrepreneurs. They started a company. I'm helping them from a business standpoint in terms of neurological access for many medical devices. But it all starts actually with my journey, and I'll take you through that. And my CAD journey started in the summer of '83. I was at the University of Rochester, and that summer day at the University of Rochester, which is summer, it's that one beautiful day that we get a year. Anyway, I worked at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics. This was a very large laser lab. It was a nuclear fusion lab. And to give you kind of a scale and sort of scope of this, it's about 3 football fields long. And there's a targeting sphere that's about 8-foot diameter titanium sphere with about 9-inch thick sort of walls. And the whole goal behind this is could we impart enough energy to create nuclear fusion? And of course, there's lots of high energy physics research that was being done there. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. I was helping them do mechanical design for some of the equipment that they use. And from the very beginning, you know, when I was a kid, I was one of these guys that would take things apart to see how they worked. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I was the best engineer because there always seemed to be 1 or 2 screws left afterwards. And while things would work, I think my parents were sort of always sort of saying, you know, just make sure you don't break it. But education from the very beginning was a kind of a key part of my life, but also it really impacted my career in terms of how I thought about things and where I spent the better part of my career. So this nuclear fusion lab, I was doing work designing beam splitters and these targeting areas. There was just a lot of mechanical type of equipment. And what was interesting is we had an early digital transformation ourselves there, because it was, you know, 1983 when I was at the laser lab, but we were doing work like it was here in the 1960s. We had drawing boards and we had the automated erasers and the templates to be able to kind of erase things. And it was a very, very manual process. And shortly after I began working there and I did a couple of designs, I think I got the ultimate in terms of a backhanded compliment. And that was my boss, who was a brilliant man, this guy, Frank DeWitt, sort of said to me, John, you're better at, in fact, I don't think he asked me, I think as much as he declared to me, you're better at computers than you are at design, aren't you? And he said, maybe you can help us here. And around that time, of course, PCs were just starting, you know, DOS PCs, but we had probably 5,000 drawings rolled up and kind of it was a mess. It was kind of all over the place. And there was really no real organization. It was just sort of one-off designs. And so we needed to get some processes in place. So at that time, I went off and started searching for a CAD system. And meanwhile, we also had, all these drawings that needed to be organized. So we ended up ultimately getting a bunch of physical cabinets to organize the drawings. And then we came up with looking back now, of course, seems quite primitive, but came up with a system to go in, a numbering system, whether it was for the capacitor bay, for the targeting area, for the beam splitters, and came up with a numbering system. And then there was also really the sort of first PC-based database called DBase. And I ended up writing an application on top of that to do drawing retrieval to try and find information. And here I am 40 years later, helping people find a CAD system and improve their product design process and do drawings. Now, why did I do that? Because my passion really started from that educational space when I had that opportunity in that university environment. And I've seen sort of these shifts that every day and every year and every new platform, we end up making it a better experience for users, better experience for students, better experience for educators. And so to do that, and to give you kind of a perspective about it, let me sort of take you through an insider look, if you will, on the early days of the Onshape journey and then how we've gotten here. To do that, I went back into the Wayback Machine, called my files that I had of old slide decks, and I found some of our early funding presentations when we were going and raising venture capital to build the company. And one of the things that we tried to communicate to investors at that time was that across industries that you typically see major innovations and disruptions and inflection points when there's a platform shift. And so if we just look at sort of the CAD industry that many of us, of course, know and are passionate about, you can see that in the 80s with the advent of the PC, that Autodesk came about and built AutoCAD, if you will. And John Walker, of course, wanted to make it actually into a whole office suite. He wanted to create the equivalent, if you will, of a word processing and PowerPoint and Excel. But like most companies, he had to focus early on. But that was the vision when it first came out for Autodesk. And they priced their product at around $5,000, and they sold it through a value-added reseller network. And then PTC in the late 80s, capitalizing the platform shift to high-performance Unix workstations, really made 3D solid modeling practical and pragmatic in the sense that you could go and actually make changeable solids. And for many of us that have been in this industry, or at least understand, PTC just sort of crushed it in the market in terms of really adding a lot of value for customers and getting rewarded for that. And but their business model and that innovation was really about $20,000 software, and it was sold through a direct sales channel. When it came to around 1995, with the advent of SolidWorks, which I spent some time there, of course, with Windows PCs, we saw what PTC had done, which is it was almost like a person with their nose stuck up against the glass. People were looking in and say, I want that. The problem was for most of those users in terms of the mainstream, it was too hard to learn, it was too hard to use, and it was too expensive. And that was really sort of the raison d'etre for the creation of SolidWorks, which was capitalize again on a new platform that expand the usage base, and we changed the business model. And along the way, with these new platforms, you get new innovation, you get new disruption, and you get new leaders that go ahead and really sort of change the world. So the question is, what happened? What happened since then? Well, not a lot. In fact, it sort of stayed that way for a very, very, very long time. And we often joked it was sort of like the land that time forgot. And so we saw the opportunity with these devices, with web browsers. Every laptop that we have, MacBooks and PCs, many of these things, all have GPUs in them. They all, really can capitalize on onboard hardware, but also take advantage of the cloud and all the resources that are appropriate that we appropriated when we started building Onshape. And so from that funding presentation, I pulled another one with another slide, which really talked about kind of what are the forces that changed things that created this opportunity. Well, one thing we realized is the product design process has changed. How people design products has changed. When I started my career early on at Raytheon, the designers and manufacturers, designers were in one part of the building, and the manufacturing shop floor was just down the hall. And that's changed. People are across the globe building things. Supply chains across different geographies, time zones, different CAD systems. The complexity of how we build things has changed dramatically. We saw the opportunity of a SaaS business model to really make it easier and get people access in a easier sort of on-ramp and much more predictable. So rather than have people go through hardware upgrade cycles, et cetera, we could build a solution that we could take on the burden of doing basically every 3-week updates. So we can manage your data, save your data. You don't ever lose data with Onshape and with a SaaS-based product. We saw, of course, what the platform could do with cloud, web, mobile. And we also, given our history and the team that had sort of built the original SolidWorks product, we also knew there were things that, given how technology had evolved, we could go back and change some of the fundamentals, whether it was the mating conditions of how things get put together, how we would manage different versions of things. And this version thing about files, I mean, this is a key thing that every student, every person is dealt with, and every organization struggles mightily with, which is who's got the right version or the latest version. And just think of yourself. You're working on a PowerPoint document and you're presenting something on Monday and it's Sunday night. We all come up with crazy naming schemas, latest version, final, absolute final version, final as of 9:05 p.m. Sound familiar? Yeah, this is stuff that we've all done. Our goal was we were trying to get rid of that problem and solve that once and for all. And it was this distributed network of how products got built that really was one of the key drivers that was causing so much pain in the industry that has now led to the adoption for Onshape on a global basis. And finally, our view was, why is the CAD world so different than the rest of the world? If you think about desktop and legacy sort of products, whether it's Oracle on the business side, SAP or IBM or Microsoft, there's a whole new generation of cloud web-based apps, whether it's Workday, Box, Salesforce, you name it. And in the CAD space with Dassault and Autodesk Seams, we saw an opportunity to build a cloud-based opportunity with Onshape. So that was kind of an insider's view that we quickly were able to get people to understand the opportunity. And so the question was, okay, well, with our mission about wanting to change how the world designs products, what was our strategy? How were we going to go ahead and do that? Well, first was to build a great team. And if we built a great team, we knew we could build a great product. The second thing is we also really wrapped our heads around this idea of moving from a gated process of how people do normal design and stage gating. We wanted to really move into an agile process. And the whole idea was that we could develop things quickly, we could test those things, we could test them with users, we could develop them again, and we can rinse and repeat and just sort of, iterate very quickly and make sure we stayed on target in terms of delivering our product. We also wanted to make it easy and affordable and accessible. This was a key thing because we believed if this was the market before the triangle, we believed we were going to make it much wider, that we were going to give access to non-traditional CAD users with Onshape because they could access it with these types of devices, tablets, Chromebooks, MacBooks. So we were going to expand sort of the size of the market and the opportunity. But a key strategic thing that we decided very early on, going back to easy, affordable, and accessible, was to focus on education. We wanted to focus on the K-12 market, the university market, and we knew we were going to have to build a curriculum, and we knew if we did those things right, we were seeding the future to help, of course, drive some of the commercial success of Onshape. And so as we went ahead and did that, we realized that education was key, and we needed to make sure that we built our product to support the education space. Now, I would say, when we became part of PTC, I think the educational team, I think we tried to do some things right. I think the education team here at PTC, taught us true professionalism of what it means to succeed and to drive adoption into the educational space. Now, I would also point out that the pandemic was a huge inflection point also for this part of the world, simply because in the past, when people wanted to gain access to the CAD system, it was expensive in terms of the platforms. Accessibility was difficult. Why? Because many people had a CAD lab instead of individual laptops. Managing those things were expensive. I'm not talking about the licenses themselves. I'm talking about just the management overhead of trying to manage the installations, who's got what version, license controls, et cetera. With the pandemic, all of a sudden, it became almost impossible, and people had to shut down their STEM classes because the doors were locked to the school, and you obviously couldn't go to the CAD lab. And so all of a sudden, Onshape became an amazing tool for many people because they simply could point people to a web link and they were up and running. We had many of the tools online to allow people to be able to start to learn it, and educators started to get on board, and they realized, really, quite frankly, how easy Onshape could be for them to teach. Now, we realize that we've got additional work to do. We've got partners that we're working with, but we've built a lot of curriculum. We're going to continue to build that curriculum, and as more educators come on board, they're sharing more information, more learnings, and we're expanding that usage. So our belief is that we really are kind of empowering the next generation. We also know, and that we're in this for the long haul, that this is empowering truly the next generation that will ultimately become, not everybody, of course, but many of these people will become engineers, they'll become engineer managers, they'll become leaders, they'll be business leaders that ultimately will see the power of a tool like Onshape, and that ultimately will lead to long-term commercial success. This generation, my son's generation, this idea of installing stuff on a laptop, I mean, that's just a crazy notion. They're the generation of being able to fearlessly go and navigate, click, 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 click. Watch any kid that's young, watch any of your students. Before you can talk to them, they're clicking on things. If you do that with any of the, what I'll call install-based software, you're going down a treacherous path, because there's not an undo, there's not a lot of save, there's not, there's no ability to kind of go back to day zero when you started design. With Onshape, it's fearless. They can go ahead and explore and try many, many things. And so our goal here is, of course, to have people engage on a global basis, on a local basis, with universities, with institutions, whether it's graduate work or with commercial engagements. The K-12 market, it's one continuum for us, and our goal is to drive the adoption on a global basis. In fact, it really is the new standard in education. This is one of the kind of the building blocks for our long-term commercial success, which is that it's the fastest growing CAD system in K-12 and universities. It's the fastest growing in usage by FIRST robotics teams. And I think we said before that it's a strategic priority for PTC. Jordan, his education team, and Jim Heppelman, the CEO of PTC, from the very beginning, made Onshape a key strategic initiative for the education space to make it easier and really to do our part during the pandemic. And that's led to tremendous growth and tremendous adoption on a global basis. But when you double click on it in terms of why it's the new standard, I think it's kind of important to point out some of the key reasons that it's become the standard. First, it's just a great product market fit in terms of the education space and what our product can do in terms of not only just capabilities, but in terms of administration and overhead and the amount of work that you need to do to be able to kind of to do, quite frankly, the non-value added things, which is to make it possible for people to use the system. What you want to do as educators is you want to work with students on the design questions, on understanding the CAD and understanding all the considerations as they're doing it, and get students excited about things. The last thing you want to be dealing with is license codes, installs, and all the headaches. So this idea of a browser and app-based sort of product versus installed software. It supports every platform, as you know, not just Windows, PC only. And it really can use any kind of compute device, from a Chromebook through to a high-end PC with graphics cards. We built the curriculum, and the system management side of things, we've really tried to make it easy to deploy both at a department district level, saving time, dollars. We ran a course, we were kind of the core backbone for it with MIT and a large aerospace company where they wanted to get people experienced in the additive space, what could be done. And some of the teachers, professors at Sloan at MIT that were running the program, they were able to get 5,000 people deployed using Onshape, in less than 20 minutes, and having accounts and get us set up and off and running. And similarly, when they finished the class, they were able to basically go and delete those accounts and kind of decommission each of those users in less than 10 minutes. So it's just dramatically easier. And as I mentioned, the pandemic really did accelerate things to Onshape. When we think about the education space, there's been a tremendous amount of momentum. Since 19, it's been over 60% average annual growth in terms of ED users, really since sort of the beginning of the pandemic. And in March of 2020, on average, each day there was about 4,700 hours of usage per day. So think about it. That's a little over 2 person years of usage a day. And then when you look at 2 years later, we're almost 23 and a half thousand hours per day. When you think about that, that's almost 5 times the amount of person years of usage per day. On an annualized basis, that's well over 4,100 person years of usage in that year alone. So a dramatic amount of usage. By the way, no other system can actually even measure this, which is kind of interesting to think about. So when you have an installed software, it's really hard to measure these types of things. For us, at a macro level and an aggregate level, we can manage and understand kind of the usage levels across the globe. And it's not just sort of the work that we're doing here at Onshape and PTC, but we have a network of partners that are helping us, whether it's from curriculum, whether it's in training, it's in programs like VEX or FIRST, on the software side of things, Solid Professor, as well as competitions that we're involved in. So there's a network of partners that we sincerely appreciate their involvement, and we're looking to expand that, because as we grow, when we're not talking about 11 and a half or 12 person years per day, but when we're talking about 20 person years per day and 50 person years a day, those days are coming. And as that happens, we're going to need more and more partners to round out the solution, to help complement and augment what people are trying to do in terms of their own needs for their own K through 12, through universities, et cetera. Perhaps the best thing to share with you, and I remember talking to a couple of deans of engineering about this, which is education. It really, as I started this out, I said education is key for our commercial success. But we believe that commercial success is also key for educators, and that is, I do believe it's a virtuous cycle. And I as I've spoken to people in the past, it's not that you're just trying to prepare people to just go out in the workforce. You're trying to prepare them with many skills, of course, so that they can enter their professions and be productive and really rise to their peak performance. But as they get ready for the future, you want to be able to make sure that they have the tools and the knowledge of what the future is using. And our belief is that in the commercial side, I happened to just meet with the Trek team recently. They're looking now for Onshape people as they've made the transition. So in their recruiting, they're looking for Onshape people. They're looking for Onshape certified people. We have a whole certification program that follows on through from the education side. So this virtual cycle will continue to grow. And as you can imagine, this is something that we will promote early and strong as time goes on. I can remember in the earliest days when I was at SolidWorks, when we first sold our first 1,000 seats. I remember I used to pick up the Boston Globe on Sundays and look for people who were looking for SolidWorks experience. It took a long time to see that come, but then it started to do it. Same thing's happening here, but I think it's going to be a hockey stick and grow, of course, much faster, just because our growth rate is much faster. To that end, Onshape is the future, and you should understand that the future is now. It's the fastest growing CAD system in the world. It's the number one fastest growing CAD system in the world. We're growing at a rate that's 7x of the average sort of rate of the CAD market growth. So the adoption is just accelerating each year. And the user base is now well north of 2 million users. And this is just a sample of some names, but there's some very well-known household names. And then there's some smaller companies that are out there that you've never heard of. And that's the beauty of this market. Instead of just being a market like this, it's a market that's very wide. It goes very wide in terms of users, companies, on a global basis. And the beauty is that we're kind of taking all the stuff that in the past, that was the heat loss due to friction, the problems, the pains, kind of getting that off the table. So users, students, educators, administrators can focus on their job and kind of get to the part that really matters, which is inspiring students, educating students about design principles, getting them excited about STEM, helping them see their ideas, everything from the little young girl that was designing and making her own boat versus buying a boat. that will spur people, that will spur creativity. It will get people excited to think about engineering, to think about mathematics, to think about design, and to think about, real skills and futures that will change our lives. And in the end, that was the whole reason we started Onshape. We started Onshape to change how the world designs products. And educators, students, and the future depends upon people thinking differently, responding quickly to challenges and problems. And we want to help make sure that the platform they use is Onshape, because we think it's the best platform for them to fearlessly go out and create new designs and improve how the products are designed that we use in our daily lives. So I am thrilled that you're here at this event. I thank you so much for your support of helping students, for teaching them some of the principles about thinking about design, to thinking about solving problems, to get them excited about science and technology and engineering. Thank you to the administrators out there that make it possible to kind of remove the headaches, to allow people to successfully go and explore these things. Thank you to our partners, and a huge thanks to Jordan and the entire PTC Education team. So enjoy the symposium. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you found some points of interest, but know that every day here at Onshape, that a core founding principle was focused on the educational space, and we're thrilled to see the adoption. Thank you very much.